is a very interesting topic and very close to my heart. About 23 years back, if I remember correctly, I had to choose my second year's master's topic, and those days we used to do our master's while we were working. So I said I'll choose the easiest topic, and I choose consumer protection as my second year LLM, sort of specialization. I never realized that over a period of time, consumer protection will attain such an importance that it touches each and every law that I'm practicing today. Right? Whether it is technology, media, telecom, everything is very very consumer focused, and so is pharma healthcare. Whenever we are looking at any new business model, any new service, any new product, ultimately consumer. So whatever those days I did for my master somehow stayed with me. Of course, we studied also the MRTP those days, which is the monopolist and monopolist and Legislative practices act, which now is a competition in competition act in a new avatar. So all these things, when we look at, it's a very interesting mix when you look at the overall scheme of consumer protection. As we know, we didn't have a specialized law on consumer protection until 1986. So when I studied my master's, which was just the law was just 11 years old, right? Not so much jurisprudence was developed by that time. Now we have had several years thereafter, and the government felt the need to come out with a new law on consumer protection, but some of the new issues being handled, product liability was one of them. They of course have added certain features about e-commerce because that was the need was felt to even figure out certain things in the e-commerce scheme of things, whether there are new consumer rights. So we have now a 2019 Act. Now, when we talk about 2019 Act, one important shift that I see also that for the first time, consumer rights have been identified. The rights such as, right to information, uh, right to be heard, various about five, six consumer rights have been identified. So it's another good orientation because whenever the courts look at it also, any case that comes up now, these rights will also somewhere guide the court when they look at a certain new situation to see that whether these rights, the test of these rights have been met. You also have a new authority that has been, sort of thought about under the Act, which will act independently in consumer interest. One may feel, oh, one more regulator, right? But I think somewhere one needs to recognize that consumer after one individual, unless collectively works together as in a class action, but it is consumer versus the the manufacturer or one of the, the seller, etc., etc. So I think somewhere from a bargaining power perspective, also, there is some amount of mismatch. One, that's something one can see probably when you look at some of the cases. So with this background, what we are trying to do today is product liability because there are various facets that come in the consumer protection. But today we thought we will take product liability as a theme and not only just discuss the concept but also apply them in certain sectors. We cannot possibly cover in a 40 to 45-minute session, all the sectors. So we have chosen certain key sectors. For example, we have chosen, say, medical device, drugs. I think Payal will cover auto. So we have tried to see how the jurisprudence has developed in the other fields as well. So with that background, just a quick note on on product liability, and I think Payal will do in more detail. But the one of the interesting things why a product liability regime, and when we say product liability, there are theories behind that, whether it is negligence-based liability, whether it is strict liability, breach of warranty, right? So when you choose something, as we will see that somewhere India is moving towards, whether India is moving towards strict liability, and in all these things, I think one important aspect is bringing social efficiency. When we say social efficiency, whenever there is, as we call, wherever there is, injury or damage must follow. It's a simple legal principle, right? So the question that arises is if the injury has occurred and it has occurred due to a defect in the product, can there be a simplistic mechanism of resolving that issue by compensating a consumer, right, without having to go into a lengthy litigation? Can there be such principles developed? So that is why we talk about, the balancing, because ultimately the cost of litigation versus, you know, paying the compensation, how do you balance that? And that is why, I'm going to request Payal to illustrate as to how the current regime also, sort of takes this into account. So with that, small background, over to you, Payal, now. Why don't we do this? Why don't we first look at what changes has 2019 Act brought? And just for the audience, it is not fully into effect in the sense the rules are still getting framed under the Act, and we'll deal with that in the end, very briefly. But insofar as the legal principles are concerned, can you just throw some light on how does the new regime look under the 2019 Act when it comes to product liability? Over to you, Payal.
Thank you, Gauri. Very good evening to everyone. As Gauri rightly said, I think the fact she mentioned that when she chose her LLM topic, she thought it would be something simple. And then she also dealt with the fact that, you might have a simplistic approach to dealing with product liability. But as and when you start just understanding the law, just the letter of the law, the way Act is being drafted, forget getting into examples and actual scenarios, you realize how complicated it is, and there are so many ifs and buts, and there are different levels of interpretation that can be taken to it. So obviously, with the new amendments to the Consumer Protection Act by last year, there's a complete chapter which has been dedicated to product liability itself. Now, the question that arises is, does that mean product liability never existed in the earlier regime? Is it something only with this 2019 amendments that now consumers can actually claim for any defect in a particular product? The answer is no, it's not that simple. It was always there in the earlier regime as well. The crux over there is any person or entity to claim any kind of product liability issue needs to come within the ambit of a consumer itself firstly to go ahead and make a case for a product liability. What the legislators have now done is made it even a little more simple. But as I progress, you will realize it's not at all simple because the definitions itself are intertwined. There are lots of overlapping definitions. What comes under what also needs to be scrutinized. But with this new chapter in place itself, you have defined the concepts of what is a product, what is product liability, who is a product manufacturer, who is a product seller, who is a product service provider. And it did not end at that itself. It also clarified what is the harm that is being caused in a product liability litigation itself. The reason this is of consequence over here is, if you look at the earlier legislation, it said the authorities would grant you compensation for loss or injury. Now, interestingly, in the new regime, when harm has been defined, it includes loss which is happening to a property which is other than the product itself, or loss in the form of a mental injury, any kind of emotional distress. It can be personal injury or death. So you're widening the concept of harm itself when it comes to any product liability litigation. Going back to how you are defining who the participants are or who could be inducted in a product liability litigation itself are several. I think the answer earlier was, is it a product manufacturer, or by virtue of the fact that I am selling a product, so the product seller is liable. Who all do you include within the entire ambit of holding of entity liable for a defect in a particular product? The answer is, looking at other legislations across other jurisdictions, is you involve all the entities who are involved in the supply or the distribution channel itself when it comes to affecting liability. This makes it even more interesting as we progress in the session because we will talk about specific industries and the role played by each of these entities. The Consumer Protection Act with its amendments has clarified that just who is a product manufacturer and what is the defect that could be classified to be held that this is a defect. Like in the earlier regime, it could be a defect when it came to the quality, when it came to the quantity, potency of the product. But now they have clearly defined that a defect in a product could be a manufacturing defect, could be a defect in the design of the product, could be a defect when it comes to not giving adequate instructions or warning about how the product needs to be used. So they have categorized it that what constitutes a defect when it comes to a product manufacturer itself. Which brings me to my next point. Who is a product manufacturer? Is it somebody who just makes the product, or somebody who is also involved in, assembling the product, installing the product, repairing the product, or involved in packaging or labeling of the product, or somebody who is just affixing a mark on the product? Interestingly, the legislation includes the product seller also within the definition of a manufacturer. So it's a broader umbrella. By virtue of being a product seller, also you come within the ambit of a product manufacturer itself. So then what is the difference when it comes to a product seller from a product manufacturer? A product seller is basically the entity who is actually having substantial control when it comes to assembling the product, designing, testing, or maintaining the product. It could also be an entity who is actually giving an express warranty, which is actually beyond the warranty which is given by a manufacturer itself, or the entity which alters or modifies the product, or an entity who has basically been involved in supposed to be involved in assembling and inspecting, but fails to exercise reasonable care in doing so, or fails to conform with the express warranties, or doesn't know or in situations where you don't even know the identity of the product manufacturer. In such cases, liability could be affixed to the product seller. Now that brings me to my last point on the definition itself of the product service provider. It gets confusing. The concept is product liability. Then we talk about a product service provider. I think the clarity over here is it's not in relation to deficiency in services per se, but when it comes to any faulty or any deficiency in services related to a particular product, which is the main subject matter in question, in that situation, the product service provider could also be held liable. Now, since we have defined the components, ingredients for having a product liability litigation, or who could be inducted as part of this litigation, the question is, what is the defense that can be used? What would be the compensation that can be granted by the authorities? And based on what principles are these compensations being granted? In the earlier regime, the kind of defenses which could be taken earlier was contributory negligence, where the fact that they have complied with the statutory standards of a particular product, the defect was recognized after the product has been sold, or there have been some unknown defects. Now the legislation clearly provides what are the exceptions under which product liability cannot be claimed. And they are explicitly provided under the Act under three circumstances: only when there is a misuse of a product, or it is purchased by a particular employer for use at workplace, but does not adhere to the instructions or warnings that are provided, or the nature of the product is such that one should have known of the associated dangers of it. Compensation. We have earlier the product liability regime, considering it came in through various legislations, including the Consumer Protection Act. It was always evolved through case laws, and it would be in the range of 10 to 20% of the cost of the product itself. But now, considering the concept itself of compensation and harm is looked at a broader ambit, it clearly provides as to what all categories for which you can claim compensation, and it has to be a minimum of 25%. There were certain reliefs which were provided even under the old regime, that you could ask for the refund of the amount, the product to be returned, you could ask for withdrawal of the product, you could ask for modification of the product along with the compensation. With this new regime in place, we also have these powers given to the authority where they can suo motu investigate in such cases and ask for recall of the product itself. Now, recall is something which has not been seen voluntarily by various manufacturers in India, especially considering it's looked at or with a tainted light that there might be some negative angle because there's a chance of a harm to your brand or reputation itself. So that's the reason this introduction is definitely going to help when it comes to the relief. And I'm going to sum up on the last point over here, which I think Gauri had touched upon briefly. What is the main principle when it comes to the product liability issue? Is it strict liability or the exceptions of negligence are also taken into consideration? When you do a comparative study with other jurisdictions, especially US and UK, which have a developed product liability regime itself, the Consumer Protection Act in both those jurisdictions provides for a strict liability regime, which is exactly what has been now adapted in the new amendments itself. It is immaterial whether you were negligent. It is immaterial whether you had taken all the necessary precautions itself, or the fact that you had taken reasonable care and duty on your part. But the fact that there is a defect that has caused an harm to the consumer is sufficient to establish a claim for a product liability litigation. There is no requirement to prove any other aspect any longer. So, defect, no matter what the cause is, a consumer can go to the consumer forum and claim for a product liability litigation. I think with this brief analysis, at least it sets out what the law is at least and what the consumers can look forward to. Back to you, Gauri.
Thanks, Payal, for that, simplified version of law. We always say that when we talk about visible expert, the person who can really simplify the most complex issue, right? I think you have done a good job on that. So I have some thoughts to share before, I go to Darren. Very interestingly, if you look at various sectors, and we are not going to today cover, the IT industry. So that's why I'll just make a couple of quick comments there. If you really see earlier, there was a concept of a software license where I got a product, right, to my system, right? So I could say that it's a product, and therefore any defect in that and liabilities arising out of that. Today we towards software as a service, platform as a service, where there is no product being delivered to me. It's going into a service regime, right? And therefore, from a liability perspective, this particular aspect about product liability may not get triggered in those relationships because it's a service that is being provided. The second thing I want to say, if at all, there are sort of some things that are being delivered, say a server or, a complicated sort of a network, that is being delivered as a product. The question that arises is, you spoke about, loss of property. Now, in today's world, data is the one of the biggest property, right? So, loss of data, right? Because of certain defects in the product, whether loss of data or data gets corrupted, right? So, how will the courts look at it is a separate question. Of course, this Consumer Protection Act may not necessarily get triggered. I mean, I just want to sort of go back to the basics that whenever an enterprise buys the products for the purpose of commercial business, then they don't have a remedy under the Consumer Protection Act. I thought I'll just clarify that position. So whenever whenever we are looking at, but somewhere, when the courts are looking at separately under a civil court regime, there is a possibility of looking at what are the principles that have developed in the other regime. So it is interesting to see, how the principles are developing in that context. But of course, if I as an individual have a my own business for my own livelihood, and then I'm getting a product, then because it is for my own livelihood, then I still fall as a consumer. So I thought I'll just clarify that position for the audience. Like slight digression, but important to know. The second thing you mentioned about several levels of, whether it is manufacturer, seller, etc., etc. Another thing I thought I should clarify, that there is always a liability that is likely to come under the Consumer Protection Act. However, inter se parties may contractually protect against each other, have insurances in place, and all of that. The important aspect which becomes, which sort of becomes important is we several times get questions when you have an exporter from outside India for the product, which is imported into India, whether a foreign party can be liable protection act from a jurisdiction perspective. So I don't see why not. I mean, that's my personal view because the civil court would, sort of, file a suit against a foreign party. I don't see why it cannot be. But from an enforcement perspective, if the import holding or getting liability imposed from a product liability perspective, at least you have somebody on the ground to take upon that liability vis-a-vis, integrity consumer not concerned about. Consumer should have relief in India, right? So I think that affect, the thinking from a consumer protection perspective. The other thing I want to clarify, in the US there are two theories, right? One is the consumer expectation theory, or a test, right? Which basically you will say that, like, let's take a simple example of a toaster, right? The toast pops out, right, and it stays in the toaster is an expectation. But if the toast starts flying around and I get injured, right, that is a defect because that is not how the product is expected to behave. So that test typically is applied to a simpler objects or simpler products. But the other test that is developed is risk utility test, which is applied to more complex products where whether there is an alternate product available considering the risk involved and what is the cost of putting that alternate product available in the market. It's a slightly complex thing, so I'll not spend too much time there, but it is important to see how under the Indian regime, how the test developed under, when they look at a damage or a deficiency and all of that, what are the tests that get applied and whether the Indian, courts rely upon these theories that have developed in the other jurisdictions. So, with that slight digression, now coming to Darren, why don't you look at, in the pharma sector, since you have been focusing on that industry, in the healthcare industry, how would you look at, a defective product, and if you could just share the nature of, liabilities that are likely to come out, and maybe see some examples, Darren.
Sure. Thanks, Gauri. So I think I'll touch upon, of course, pharma sector and the healthcare sector broadly. And I think the principle that, over time and jurisprudentially, what we have come to see is that consumer fora, of course, as well as courts, are always very careful not to cross that fine line whereby you protect the interest of the consumer, but at the same time, you try not to scare or discourage people who are in this essential service to the extent, and the common phrase that's used is that they try not to shake the hand of the surgeon, and especially in the healthcare sector that becomes relevant. So, there is a fine line and a check and balance.
I'm sorry, but nowadays nobody should shake hands, by the way.
Of course. Yeah. So, in that context, we have to remember that the healthcare sector as a whole, which includes pharma, medical device, and the healthcare sector itself, they're all very highly regulated sectors. And they involve highly technical staff, highly technical personnel, and the products that are put out are also very highly technical and come from an area of expertise. So, what exactly have we seen in the past when it comes to regulation? A lot of the cases that we find in the healthcare sector are related to medical negligence, and this side of things has been going on for a long time. There was, of course, some debate as to whether a patient can be considered a consumer, and that was settled some time ago, and patients were decided to be consumers within the ambit of the Consumer Protection Act itself. So that question was put to rest. But now that the new regime has come in, there was again a revival of this debate to the extent that healthcare services was dropped out of the final draft and the final legislation that came in when the definition of services was put out, largely because the medical fraternity had put out a lot of opposition in terms of having to include healthcare as part of the ambit of service. So there is some amount of ambiguity today as to whether the deletion of that word healthcare would be sufficient in terms of now deciding whether healthcare as a whole would be considered outside of the ambit of the consumer protection regime going forward as and when the new Consumer Protection Act comes into effect. But in our minds, it may not be the case exactly because it's still an inclusive definition and we still have judgments that they say that patients are considered consumers. So in that light, even the healthcare sector and healthcare providers may not completely fall outside of the entire regulatory ambit once the new consumer protection regime kicks in. So that's one. Now, of course, there's always going to be your standard issues with respect to deficiency of services, which may not change too much when it comes to the new regime. But what may happen in addition from a product liability point of view in the healthcare sector is that we have to remember that drug delivery and a lot of application of medical devices is revolving around the providing of a service by a healthcare professional. So, for example, if I had to insert a hip implant, I have to purchase that hip implant and it comes along with the service of it being operated into me. And for that, as Payal and Gauri were also mentioning, there is also the concept of product service provider. And if there is negligence and if there is some sort of issue when it comes to the actual service of having to install or implement or implant a particular device or in the delivery of a particular pharma product, we're looking at a situation where a healthcare service provider may also now fall within the ambit of a product liability issue as well. On top of course, the other side of things where deficiency of services may be included. Now, having said that, the pharma sector, from the manufacturers and the distributors, as well as the medical device manufacturers and distributors, they are clearly covered. And with respect to standards, with respect to deficiency in these areas, they may still also be prosecuted, or cases may come up in terms of consumer litigation. And so that more or less is standard as we have seen in the past, and that should continue in the new regime as well. But another aspect that we should also take a look at is on the new technologies that will be coming up in the healthcare sector. For example, there'll be a lot of increase in wearable technology, in services that are connected to wearable technologies. For example, if today you are purchasing a watch which contains a healthcare monitor, it contains your blood pressure monitor, heart rate monitor, and it comes tied with a service. For example, it provides a nutritionist, emergency fall detection, which will then call for an ambulance, so on and so forth. And for these situations, when there is a defect or if there is a deficiency in having that service provided, there may be an overlap in terms of who becomes the product service provider, who becomes the person responsible for a particular action that may be initiated by a consumer in such a situation. So it'd be interesting to see how these things pan out once the new regime also kicks in. And this is broadly what we can find in the healthcare service sector as a whole. Over to you, Gaurav.
Thanks, Darren. A couple of reactions to what you said. Number one is when we talk about product, the drugs, that we consume, right? So of course, there are clinical trials that go behind it and all of that, right? So what we have seen in some instances, for example, is that if there has been a recall of a drug in other jurisdictions, right, for whatever reason, and the recall has not been undertaken in India. One is the drug regulators will deal with it is a separate point altogether. But whether a consumer can have an understanding to say that, okay, I could go ahead and sort of say that you did not recall in India, and because of which the drugs were available, and then leading to liability, right? So this this transition from other jurisdiction to India, whether and how it will be looked at. For example, if there are adverse events that have been noted in relation to a particular drug, then whether in the Indian context also Now there are situations, because as you are aware that different uh, genetically sort of developed uh, products or otherwise may work for one sort of DNA kind of population, but may not work with the other. So these are very complex areas to look at, and therefore when you look at product liability, these understanding of these areas will be very, very important. The other aspect that you mentioned was very interesting. um, on the aspect about the variable and the service. So I have a slightly different sort of view than of course you laid out the point, but the way I look at the definition, as Payal mentioned, is that the service in relation to the product. That is the way I will look at it. That the warranty service, whether the product is working or not, versus service delivery of that product, which you're saying ambulance and all of that, right? So I think we will just need to think a little bit more when you look at the definition, whether it is the service in the functioning of the product versus service delivered to the product. So there is a slight distinction, maybe, again, this is all new for all of us. So how the courts will look at it, we don't know, right? But this is another way to look at, look at the situation as well. So I think since you mentioned about medical negligence, I know it is in the context of a service that medical negligence issue arises, but it is very important to understand that, because what you said, and when we speak with several medical device companies, the most important thing that arises is when the device has no absolute no issue, right? But it has been implemented incorrectly, leading to liability. Now, the question is, that is the place where the point that you were making, it's a service in relation to that product. So, in that situation, does the manufacturer also become liable if the doctor has not, performed the surgery in an appropriate manner for implementing that device? And we actually have seen live cases. I cannot, for confidentiality reasons, bring it out here, but we have seen cases where the same device, when implemented by two separate surgeons, will act differently, right? So that's why, Shreya, why don't you bring out a related topic on medical negligence and how the jurisprudence has developed in India.
Thank you for that question, Gauri. So, like Darren has already touched upon, medical negligence in India was, and whether healthcare services were included within the ambit of the Consumer Protection Act 1986, which is the older one, was considered in the case of BP Shanta versus the Indian Medical Association. And the Supreme Court in that case went into two really interesting questions of law. The first was with respect to whether healthcare services are within the ambit of the Consumer Protection Act, and the answer to that was a resounding yes. And the second was with respect to services provided free of charge. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But before that, let's just put down the principles that have come up in the case of consumer protection with respect to medical negligence cases. So the question that we get asked most often, and specifically by doctors, is what are the situations in which we can be held liable, or if you make a small mistake, will we be held liable under the Consumer Protection Act? And the answer to that is that the law, at least the principles currently laid down by court, like they overwhelmingly support healthcare practitioners and try to protect them from any cases that have been filed by relatives of patients or patients after recovery, which have been filed frivolously. And so, to that extent, the courts are very clear that if not being able to cure your patient or not being able to treat your patient successfully is not necessarily negligence, because these things happen in the medical profession. So that's one really important principle that's been laid down. And the second one that's been laid down is that for one to establish negligence, it can't just be that there were probably two options available and the doctor went for one option over the other, and maybe both of those options would have worked out, but the one the doctor went for did not work out. So that's not the standard of proof that's applicable in medical negligence cases. You have to show that what the doctor did was quite negligent, and that no reasonable person who has the background that a doctor has would have taken that call or would have given that form of treatment, or that the doctor was negligent in providing treatment. So, for instance, in one case, this woman's condition, she was in the hospital and she just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And the nurse kept calling the doctor, but the doctor refused to come and physically examine her or transfer her to another facility. And so, when eventually the woman died, the doctor was held negligent because she had multiple chances to rectify and make sure that the patient was given proper treatment, but the doctor chose not to do so. So that's one of the, so you have to, so that's like really the bar of standard of proof to hold a doctor liable in these medical negligence cases. So coming to how the issue will be under the new consumer protection law, we don't see the principles changing a lot. So under the Consumer Protection Act, like Gigi, like Gauri pointed out, the healthcare service or the doctor would be considered to be a healthcare service provider. So it would be considered as a service. And the one that we see it most likely falling under is that in case of a product service provider, the HCP would be, or the healthcare provider would be liable in case of an omission of commission or negligent act which caused harm. So really that's the standard of proof under the new act also, and we don't see that changing a lot from the previous law in terms of whether the doctor is liable and what case the doctor is liable in. And we think that that principle also extends to whether the hospital is liable. So the courts in multiple cases have held that in case compensation has to be paid to the patient, the hospital and the doctor would be liable jointly to the patient, because even though obviously the hospital itself is not capable of performing any medical procedure, the doctor has been engaged by the hospital, and so the hospital would be vicariously liable for the acts of the doctor. However, between hospitals and doctors, they can have a separate arrangement by way of contract, where maybe the doctor has to indemnify the hospital or hospital has to indemnify the doctor, however they choose to do. Coming to how this might change with respect to new technologies coming in the in the healthcare provision service sector, two main technologies that we really see taking off right now is the use of artificial intelligence in diagnosis, one, and second is the use of robotic surgery. So there have already been multiple cases in India where doctors have used robots to perform surgeries. And in this case, it's the example that Gauri was talking about in her introduction to this question, right? Like what happens if the same medical device applied by one doctor turns out one way, but maybe in another operation it goes wrong. And pinning liability in those cases, whether it was the medical device manufacturer's fault because the robot malfunctioned, or whether it was the doctor's fault because the doctor was not able to operate that robot correctly. Like these are questions that are going to have to be answered. And the Consumer Protection Act seems very well placed to tackle them, at least compared to the previous law, because it's very specific and clear cut as to when who will be liable. So it's clear when the manufacturer will be liable, it's clear when the service provider will be liable. So in cases where there is an amalgamation of product and service, these things are taken care of very well under the Consumer Protection Act. The tricky bit, however, is the artificial intelligence bit, because doctors may not verify diagnostic reports that are given by the artificial intelligence machine. And what's so unique about artificial intelligence, at least through artificial intelligence, is its ability to grow from its own learnings, which means that even the person who has programmed the artificial intelligence may not actually be held liable, because 2-3 years down the line, the AI machine will be a very different machine from the one that it was programmed. And so in those cases, how liability will be apportioned is something that's really interesting and might actually be a question that comes up in the future. So that's an overview of the law. Gauri, over to you.
This is another interesting angle to look at the point which I made earlier, that when any individual for his own living is taking certain device, right, and then there is a defect. Now here, if it's a doctor who is is a consumer itself in relation to that device, right, and then that device does not function, so doctor also has an independent claim against the medical, device or an equipment supplier, because he is acting as a consumer, though he is using that for a commercial benefit, but for his own livelihood, right? So I think that will be an interesting thing to see how these inter-se claims develop over a period of time. And the more you think, the more situations you come across, and you keep thinking probably how it will pan out. Hopefully, we don't see too many cases. We don't too many of these issues coming up. We want patients to be safe, but at the same time, we should be aware of these issues and be sort of thinking on how it is likely to develop. So, Darren, we have seen, under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, uh, that regulator, though deals with drugs, medical devices, I feel that we have over time, seen that regulation doesn't really solve the product liability problem. So, just throw some light upon how no remedy under that, and why the Consumer Protection Act is the right sort of place to go under.
Sure, Gauri. No, you're completely right. The Drugs and Cosmetics Act and the various rules that come under them, they do regulate the standard, and they also regulate adverse events, so on and so forth. But now we have to remember that within this legislation, the action to be taken is at the regulator level. There is no instance where a consumer of a product, be it a drug or a medical device, can initiate action because of a certain defect. It has to be done specifically through the regulator itself. And the compensation that can arise from this situation is limited. Most of the provisions that deal with issues under this legislation are in the nature of penal consequences, and they are penalties that are imposed on the manufacturer or the retailer or the distributor, but they're not really in terms of compensation to the affected person itself. Very limited instances where the penalty imposed on the manufacturer or the distributor or the retailer may also be split with the person affected. And this is specifically only with relation to spurious or adulterated products. But there is a much larger ambit when it comes to issues that could arise with respect to a particular drug or a medical device. That does not necessarily mean that a person affected by that particular product is going to be compensated or has the opportunity to initiate action because of it. So that's where we see that there is an important requirement for the Consumer Protection Act to step in. And we only see that there are very specific instances. And I'll give you another one. So at least when it comes to drugs, the new drugs and clinical trial rules that are within the drug law itself, they do provide for compensation measures, and they have formulas for calculating how that compensation should be provided. And this is specifically in the instance where there is any injury or death that involves a subject that is part of a drug trial. So in that respect, at least when it comes to drug products, there is some compensation mechanism that has been put in place, and there is a formula that can be applied straight. So in those situations, there is some amount of remedy. But again, when it comes to medical devices and how and whether the regime itself is sufficient, in fact, it did come up, last year and the year before that, where a particular product was found to be defective both in India as well as globally. And it was already implanted in multiple patients, and it was causing deterioration and so on and so forth within which required reimplantation, revision surgery, so on and so forth. But at that point, when there was a question as to how exactly the compensation could be provided for this particular defect in the product, it was even decided and it was acknowledged by the regulators itself that the current drug law and the drug regime doesn't necessarily provide for that compensation that can be provided to a consumer. And in that particular instance, there needed to be a formula that was developed by the regulator and then implemented in order to provide compensation for these situations. So we do see that there is a definite need for the Consumer Protection Act to step in so that consumers are given an avenue to one bring these sort of defective products into the consumer fora, and also be provided some sort of compensation um, as well. Now, the good part about the new consumer protection regime is that, of course, the authority has been set up, and the authority is also empowered to bring in class action claims. And this is also very relevant, especially in the scenario that I had also mentioned earlier, where there are a large number of consumers that may be affected by a single product. And if there is a particular action to be taken, the action can be initiated as a class as opposed to at an individual level. So this becomes helpful and beneficial to the consumers as a whole. Apart from this, the Consumer Protection Authority is also given the authority to direct for recalls and direct for withdrawals of particular products. So while that similar provision and similar power has been given to the drug regulator, they do apply in specific instances. And what the benefit of this also being now to the consumer protection regulator is that the ambit of situations where a recall can take place will be wider and will protect the consumer interest further. So these are some of the situations, and it becomes very important in the medical device scenario that the consumer protection legislation is available as an option for compensation in various scenarios, especially in these sectors. And with that, over to you, Gauri.
Thank you, Karan, for that overview. I think there are certain questions we will come to in a bit. Couple of them we have answered already on the chat window. There is one which we will park because we want to now move to the auto sector, which is another interesting sector. And Payal has sort of quite a few interesting things to share with us. The reason we thought we will take auto sector because now we are seeing more and more complex products coming out in the market. And as I said before, when you have complex products, it becomes more difficult to identify who is liable, right? Because there will be product assembly that will happen. There will be multiple providers of different components to the product, etc. So that's why we thought let's take couple of sort of learnings from the auto industry and then see what are the takeaways for us. And Darren, if you are able to answer the question in the meantime on the chat box itself, please go ahead and answer that. Over to you, Payal.
Thank you, Gauri. Auto industry. So India, I mean, before the COVID situation, was expected to come out as the world's third largest passenger vehicle market by 2021. What does this mean? It means you need to have stricter laws and regulations in place. You need to be even more careful as a manufacturer and seller in the auto industry, what precautions you need to take. You need to educate the consumers properly that what they are actually getting into by buying that particular product, as well as set the consumer expectation, which is one of the theories Gauri touched upon earlier. Now, in the traditional auto industry, I think we can break it up into two aspects. Suppose you meet with an accident. There is a component which looks into the fact that there is a physical element and a personal element involved in it. So is it because of the driver's actions that it led to the particular accident even before reaching a product or a defect in a particular product? Then comes the issue whether there was a defect in the particular product itself. Now, whether that was a manufacturing defect, whether that was a defect when it comes to design, or the fact that maybe the product was absolutely fine, it was without any defect, yet what the manufacturer failed to do is they did not give any kind of instructions or warning on how to actually use the product. Coming back to the principles of product liability and what applies is the same even in the case of auto industry. The strict liability principles apply. So if there is a defective product, whether you knew of the defect or you had taken any negligent action towards it or not, the fact that the product has a defect and has caused injury is all that is required for a legal liability. Now, at the same time, there is another angle to it, whether if the product which has been in the market is actually unsafe or is it unreliable could constitute a breach of a express or an implied warranty itself. Now, it seems simpler when it comes to the traditional auto industry, but today we are no longer in the traditional auto industry. We have moved to a stage where it's actually threefold. You have electric vehicles, you have shared connectivity, you have automated vehicles as well. So, are you going to have three different regimes in place? Now, there are certain kind of complications when it comes to these three regimes or these three categories of auto industry. There is not just a product which is involved. Along with the product, it involves maybe a hardware and a software. If you can pinpoint the issue to the hardware, you can say it's the hardware malfunction or defect which led to the cause of the accident. The second issue is if it's connected to the software. Now, interestingly, when you look at other jurisdictions, the first question is what is a software? Is it a product or a service? I think that's the basic threshold which one needs to cross even before understanding what is product liability when it comes to automated vehicles. So if software is not a product, does that mean it absolves the software person who is behind actually getting the internet and software angle to the entire auto industry from liability, and it's only the hardware component which is going to be held liable? There is no simple yes or no answers definitely in the Indian context, because it's not that we have had cases in the past, we have seen how they have looked into these cases. In other jurisdictions, especially in UK, there is a full-fledged legislation, which is the Automated Electric Vehicles Act itself, which actually takes out scenarios where you can hold which participant liable for a particular default. This brings into question two aspects which need to be considered when it comes to affecting liability. The first is, how do you look at data? Does this make data extremely critical? So when you're looking at evidence itself, you need to look at the big black box of data itself and how that has contributed towards it. The second, you need to take expert opinions when it comes to evidence. How does the software actually work? How has it contributed? How is it interlinked with the hardware itself? And where has actually the default occurred for you to affect the liability? So I won't say it's a simple answer, but I will just end with saying there are four main points which we can keep in mind to ensure that if you are in a situation like that as a manufacturer, what precautions you can take at your end. Whether you have documented the instructions properly, you have set the consumer expectation properly that this is what the dangers associated with this particular product, this is what is to be expected out of this particular product itself, and at the same time, whether you have proper policies in place and you have reviewed those policies, you have reviewed your testing procedures, also conducted the risk assessment at your end to understand that you have dealt with the risk which may come up. Then the last aspect is whether you have provided necessary warnings and instructions to ensure that the consumer is well aware, and then basically you're setting the consumer expectations and also adequately covering them. So these, considering the amendments to the Act itself, where we are trying to bring in all entities at different chains or different level itself, it's slightly difficult for anyone to actually escape liability because you're clearly defining what is your role, which category you fall under. So is it something through evidence it can be pinpointed that you were actually not at all responsible for this defect to have occurred so that you can be absolved of the liability? Or each party has a unique separate role to play. But at the same time, I think the purpose of having electric vehicles, automated vehicles, is you want to encourage innovation and technology. Both need to go parallelly. I mean, when you're developing the consumer law regime as well to protect the consumers, it cannot be at the cost of stifling innovation. So how you balance this both, whether you have a separate legislation or separate rules in place, which will aid to the existing legislation to say, okay, when it comes to these kind of usage of technology, software, this is what you need to look at. I think, Gauri, back to you for your inputs on this topic.
No, I think brilliant. I think the last point that you mentioned, because that always, sort of, as I started by saying, ultimately it's a balancing act. You don't want to stifle innovation, but you do want to protect the consumers, right? So when it comes to manufacturer who's into very high end, sort of cutting edge products, and then looking at a product liability because they themselves do not know how the products are likely to behave, right? In those situations, I believe a robust insurance regime. Now, whether insurance regime will support this or they will also put their, regular exclusions to cover these liabilities, one doesn't know, right? But I think that is where a very we call a social balance, which is very, very important and in the Indian context, I want to bring out another aspect which don't, may not many people realize. But unlike US and other jurisdictions where the lawyers are allowed to take contingency-based cases, and that is why you will find that in the US, when I say contingency-based cases, is in the US, etc., the lawyers are allowed to take, say, a 10% of the compensation, that a consumer may get, or whatever the percentage, so that the initially the lawyer actually doesn't take any fee. Only if the consumer wins, then does he get a percentage fee, which regime is not allowed in India. Right or wrong is a separate question. But because that regime is not present in the India when it comes to lawyers, then unless the consumer is really able to, fund itself, fund herself or, himself that cost of litigation, because these will be very complex issues to determine, as you rightly said, by experts and the like. And therefore, the class action, of course, there will be pro bono lawyers out there. Of course, don't want to undermine that community which definitely supports this kind of litigation. But another thing that the government has done is the Consumer Protection Authority that has been put in place, and whether they will play an important role, to support consumers is something we need to, wait and watch. I think the other, other aspect, what are the various three, four aspects, for the product, product liability regime overall to function is, of course, consumer awareness that you mentioned, well-established discovery procedures in the Indian context. Now, slowly we are beginning to see that because ultimately there are complex issues to demonstrate and prove. Burden of proof, how it will, play this way or that way, because I don't need to, don't necessarily, there is no question of proving negligence, etc. So that issue has been taken out in the current law. Whether if there is any incident occurs about a particular product, whether a mandatory investigation should be, required, whether or not a consumer, initiates any claim so that you have evidence available. Plus there is, I think, now the law also provides for a mediation as one of the steps in the act itself, if I'm not wrong. And how can that be effectively used to reduce litigation, but at the same time, giving that balancing act between a manufacturer and a consumer. Uh, uh, of course, strong recall mechanism. Do we in India have that, appropriate distribution chain where you can even do a proper recall of the product? Now, all these things are absolutely critical when it comes to an effective consumer protection regime. So, simply Peter having an act which is, giving all the rights, liabilities, and all of that is typically not sufficient to create this ecosystem where even the manufacturer is able to take risk, but at the same time, consumer is, compensated at the right place. I think we are almost like on dot. Insofar as time is concerned, I think we have answered some of the questions on the chat box. If we haven't answered any, we will get back to you.